Hey, LCC fam, welcome to More Than Sunday podcast. It's Lauren and Tim Sewalt here, and we're going to talk about Sunday. And kind of what we do is we did this anyways naturally. Tim and I would kind of talk about, what the Lord's speaking to us in the mornings or what the sermon meant to us. And so we decided to bring you in on that conversation. And so that's what this podcast is just kind of diving into some of the thoughts and how we're applying kind of what we feel like the Lord's laid on our heart. So we're sharing that with you guys. So, but this week is different. It was my first time. Well, it's not my first time. It's my first time on
a Sunday morning.
On a Sunday morning and on that stage. And really, other than it was the first time we've ever had we've had two women that were missionaries speak. And so that was kind of like a first for LCC. So it was cool.
It was
good.
It was good.
I was honored, and it was good, to do. So.
Whoop, whoop, go LCC women.
Yeah, so.
And, usually when one of us preaches, we give each other a bunch of notes and criticisms.
No, we don't.
No, we don't. No. It's like, let me tell you all the things you said
wrong.
No. So we won't do that as part of this. No, we don't ever do that.
No, I laughed because I was like, I wasn't kidding when I said the part about if you don't like this, you can take it up with Tim because he's heard it 4 times. But nobody did. I mean, not that. I mean, I can handle it. I'm just kidding. But I was like,
corrections. We're not. What is it? What does she call herself? TLC. We're not doing corrections. This is not a corrections podcast.
Yeah. I love her. But yeah, so any thoughts from Sunday?
Well, I thought it was great. I thought it was an awesome message. Super proud of you, and I feel like you brought some just real challenges, some new ways to think about the story of the woman caught in adultery, but then also, of course, like new ways to think about Judas.
Yeah, it kind of came about because one day I was sitting there doing my makeup, and that's kind of when my mind is just like, wondering. And I was just thinking about all the stuff I'm constantly seeing on TikTok about people leaving the church because of, honestly, the Robert Morris Gateway thing is kind of what's been across a lot of my feed. And so I was just thinking about it and just was like, I see that kind of stuff hurts people. And I get it. I talked about a little and just touched on the subject so that, I've dealt with church hurt. Dealt with church hurt multiple times. I mean, I grew up in this church. I'm 40 years old. My parents have been the pastors for 43 years.
43 Going on 44.
So it's been my whole life. And while I haven't been here that whole time, we did leave for a season. We lived in California, lived in Austin. This has been my church home. Even when we lived in California and Austin, I still worked for the church in some capacity.
Yeah.
Did website and graphics and all that.
You even made like a business trip from California.
Yeah. So,
to come do something here.
Yeah. So in some capacity, this has always been my church home. I've loved this church. Obviously, it's my parents' legacy. So it's mattered to me more on such a level than just even the most devout, attender and member. So, but just kind of seeing how hurt people were by when men and pastors fall.
Yeah.
I got that. I understand that. I understand that it causes severe bitterness and like it makes you question everything. I was like, I get that because I went through that season myself of like just me questioning Jesus and Christianity and what the Bible said and the cliche things that Christians said. And so I was just doing my makeup and I felt like the Lord said, even Jesus had Judas. And it didn't make Jesus any less real because Judas was around. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so true. And it's like the presence of Judas in Jesus's life didn't make what Jesus was saying, doing any less real, present. And so that just really hit home for me. And so, I just wanted to share that.
That's really good.
So.
It was great. I loved how you kind of went into depth on like what does grace actually mean. It's a term we throw around a lot.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
As Christians.
Right.
Even if you're, like say America, right? Let's say grace.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Christian culture.
Right.
There's a lot of we use the word grace a lot. We don't really understand what it means, and so I loved how you broke it down. And it is offensive to really have grace for somebody. I mean, it starts out with Jesus having grace for us, and you got to see that, because we've been going through the Gospels and we've been talking about what Jesus said and kind of what happened and like why he was saying it and what the context was. And there was just so many times where Jesus was giving people grace and it offended the religious leaders of that day because they didn't feel like they were good enough. The tax collectors and the sinners, like they're not good enough to receive even like your recognition. Like they wouldn't even associate.
Right.
And what grace is that, sometimes we just think grace is like forgiveness or mercy.
Right.
But what even makes it more offensive, and it can be offensive, like if you're kind of like, we do a lot of spectating, right, on social media or the internet with news and media. But like we kind of sometimes can, depending on what the offense is, we can get upset about like, wow, you just forgave them?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You're so weak,
Yeah.
But like Jesus like doubles down, and it's like he didn't just forgive, like you don't owe me anything. It's like, now let me give you a big check because I believe you can change. Like that's what grace is.
Yeah.
Is not, it's not just the forgiveness of the offense and like clearing the slate, but then also putting a deposit on top of it.
Yeah.
Because he believes the best in us.
Yeah. It's like, and this was one of your thoughts that I'd shared, was it's breaking the chains that bound her to her life.
Yeah.
Her past life. And I mean, even just, I saw a TikTok yesterday, and it was a daughter-in-law talking to her in-laws about why they haven't left Gateway Church. And she was saying, in essence, she viewed their grace for what happened as very offensive. And she felt like that they should cancel. And I think there's a difference between, like, for instance, Jesus did not dismiss the sin.
Yeah.
And for instance, I don't think we should dismiss sin. And I feel like very often the church is viewed as dismissing sin. And I think there have been churches that have dismissed sin. And so I think that's toxic.
Yeah.
But I think there's a difference between when Jesus looks at her and he's like, where are your accusers? But he also says, go and sin no more.
Yeah.
So he's acknowledging it was sin, and he's telling her, like, you need to change.
Yeah.
You need to do better. And so I think it's easy to be like, I can't believe you're still going to church there or going to church there or any church, because churches are corrupt.
Can't believe you go to church.
Yeah.
It's just full of a bunch of hypocrites.
It's full of hypocrites. And it's really funny because the world on one hand wants you to accept these people, and it just depends on what they view as sin. So they view one thing not as sin, and they want you to accept that person. But then they view this other thing as sin, but then you need to cast them out. So we should cast out the Robert Morris types, and then the other sins we should accept. And so that's why we just can't use the world as our moral compass.
World culture, because it changes so fast.
Oh yeah.
So fast.
So fast.
I was thinking about it, and it's like Jesus, and we're called to be like Jesus in everything we do, become more and more like him. But Jesus, and we're supposed to deal with sin, but in the light of hope.
Yeah.
And the world wants us to deal with sin and cancel.
Yeah.
Jesus wants to deal with sin in the light of hope.
Yeah. Amen.
And, that's what he did with the woman at the well.
Yeah.
And, gosh, that's what he's done with me.
Yeah.
That's what he's done with all of us. I was thinking about the Judas thing, and, I wasn't, thank God, I wasn't on a big platform, earlier in our marriage when I was really struggling with my battle with addiction to pornography and secretly and doing it all the wrong ways. I just think, had I been on a bigger platform, I would have been coined as one of the hypocrites that the reason people leave the church over. Yeah. It was definitely God's provision that I wasn't, because at the time I was working on becoming like a worship pastor for a really large church in
Yeah.
Fort Worth. And when I finally gave in and just said, Lord, I want to deal with this
Yeah.
your way, I went to that pastor and said, like, hey, this is going on with me, and I'm gonna take my name out of the hat, and I
Yeah.
need to deal with my marriage, and I need to get better. And man, he was so gracious with me, and those pastors who are great friends loved on us.
Hmm.
They helped us
Yeah.
through it, and that was grace.
Yeah.
Because it's like probably pretty disturbing for somebody that you're considering on hiring
Yeah.
to come to you with that information.
Yeah.
But he didn't cast me out. He loved me.
Hmm.
They loved us, and they helped us during a really hard time. So I mean, that
Yeah.
to me, that that's grace,
Yeah.
and that's probably inconvenient for them.
Yeah.
It's probably very disappointing for them.
Yeah.
But they gave us grace.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things I was like, I hope it was clear that it's like, I'm not talking about behavior modification. Like,
Yeah.
just Judas just needed to, modify his behavior a little bit more.
Yeah.
And that would have been, because like sometimes it's like, that's kind of what I think maybe teenagers hear is
Mhm.
behavior modification.
If Judas had just prayed more.
If he just would have tried harder,
Yeah, Judas would have tried. Yeah. He was doing all the things. That's the thing. He was doing all the things.
he was behavior modification in essence.
But his heart didn't truly believe
Yeah.
that Jesus is Lord in the person. It's like, the plans are in your hands, Jesus.
Yeah.
And I trust you.
Yeah.
And, some days we wake up and we're a Judas.
Yeah.
We're on the fence on whether we trust the Lord.
My kids really push me there sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, before we just pile on Judas,
Yeah.
we can be, I spent a long time doing all the things.
Yeah.
I was close. I had all the right friends.
Mhm.
I was in all the right circles. And, this area of my life was far from the Lord. And I was dying inside.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but Jesus has grace even for us hypocrites.
Yeah. Yeah. I look back and just think often people look at the woman caught in adultery and it's the worst day of her life in so many ways.
Mhm.
Like she just got totally raked against the coals and how embarrassing. But really, and it's annoying, but like God took that moment, the worst moment,
Mhm.
that no one would say that would be good.
Yeah.
Like,
no.
oh my gosh, just wait. They're going to all know, and it's going to be the best day of your life.
Yeah.
And it's like, ew,
The whole
no.
town's going to know.
The whole town's going to know what you did, but it's going to be worth it. No, it's not.
Yeah.
But like, it was. And like, so often, that's what the Lord wants to do. That's what the Lord was waiting to do with you and pornography.
Mhm.
He wasn't going to release you from it. Not really, but he wasn't going to. But like, he all along wanted you to say, man, this is what the Lord's done for me.
Mm-hmm.
He was always wanting you to publicly use that as a turning point.
Yeah.
Because how many people come to you? A lot.
A lot.
A lot.
A lot.
A lot. So where else would they have turned to if they didn't know? You
Yeah.
know? And so we've even heard like, I can't believe you tell people. And it's like,
Yeah.
uh...
So one of my favorite quotes from my really close mentor, Mark Dennison, he says that God's not going to use you in spite of your sin. He's going to use you because of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like,
Yeah.
really? He's going to use me because of the sin that I've been saved from? And,
Yeah.
I think that a lot of times we have this attitude that's like, well, God, if you can still use me. I struggle with that attitude myself. Like, God, please use me in spite of all the mess that I am.
Yeah.
And God says, no, I'm going to use you because you're a mess.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that my power, like Paul says, I boast in my weaknesses all
Mm-hmm.
the more so that God's power and strength can be shown through me and what he's doing in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like your heart breaks for that woman, but yet it's what needed to happen probably for her to leave her life of sin.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that's kind of a hard pill to swallow, that the Lord is going to take you down to nothing. So then that way he can also extend his hand
Yeah.
to you?
There's like, I mean, I just heard this off of something, but there's like the statistic about criminals and addicts and like pretty much everybody who's hiding something, but especially on the criminal side, that when the police finally make the arrest, usually that person is relieved.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I don't have any
It's so
choice but to
miserable.
stop.
Yeah.
And so that's what God does for us sometimes. That's
Yeah.
His mercy.
Oh, that's so true.
You know, is
She
that
was probably like, oh, this life.
yeah,
That's what sin does, though. It looks so enticing, and then you get wrapped up in it, and it is so suffocating, and you feel like there's no escaping.
yeah,
And but that's what was beautiful about Grace, is that it's literally setting her free
yeah,
to say, you don't have to subscribe to that life anymore.
yeah.
Everybody knows now. Now you can walk free. No one can dangle it in front of your face and be like, did you have,
It's
you
like,
know?
yeah,
Yeah,
I did.
I was
I
super
did.
terrible.
Yeah, that was me.
Yeah. And I mean, that's how I want to be.
Mhm.
Where it's like, dude, I myself have struggled. I'm not perfect.
Yeah,
You know, it's like, I don't think I'm tricking anybody into thinking I am. I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure. You know, I
no
said,
tricks here.
yeah, I said, piss me off on Sunday, you know.
Oh,
So,
I didn't know that was not good.
well, I don't know.
My bad.
I mean, who knows? I said it.
Who knows?
But I did go through that season where like I was questioning everything,
Yeah,
and I would just, you know, and I would come to you, and that's like, I look at that and I think, man, deconstruction was really good for me because it really made me really look at what was wrong with my foundation.
yeah,
And I had a shaky foundation. I'd been serving the Lord for, I don't know, 18 or so years at the time. And so now this has been, I guess, 3 or 4 years. But it's recent. So that's, you know, like sometimes like I feel like the devil whispers to me like, see, you're not good enough. Like you questioned everything. I was like, I did. Yeah, I did.
I think 6 years. I think it was
So.
6 years. Yeah.
And so I was just really, really struggling for about a year or two.
Mm-hmm.
And we still came to church, and I would just bring my questions to you, and I would say, like, I just don't get this.
And I'd have all the right answers.
Yeah.
I
Sometimes you would just be like, I don't know. But you never guilted me. You never made me feel bad for questioning. And I wonder, like, if you went through that, like, how would I feel? And I don't know if I would have handled it with as much grace as you handled it, you know, because I think back at that season, and I was like, man, I was really bitter and really angry. And I was exactly like those people that are now on TikTok who are really bitter and really angry.
I think something that sticks with me is that if God is big enough to turn a hypocrite around like me, He's definitely big enough to help someone who's earnestly seeking it.
Yeah.
And that's what you were doing. And, you know, also I know that if God's big enough to deal with our mess ups, He's big enough to deal with our questions.
Yeah.
And He doesn't get offended. I think that a lot of us, we get offended for God. It's like, how could you even say that? How could you even think that?
Yeah.
And then, of course, that piles on the guilt to that person. So, like, I think, you know, as you walk through your life as a Christian, we're going to have some hard questions from some people in your life, whether it's people you're witnessing to, people outside the church, maybe it's people in the church, maybe it's people in your family. And sometimes it's okay to say, I don't know.
I don't know. And you did.
I wish I did know, but I do know one thing, and I know that the Lord is good.
Yeah.
And even though I can't give you an answer, that doesn't mean that He doesn't have an answer for you.
Yeah.
Because I'm just me. You know?
Yeah. Well, I think the whole time it was my goal was to really, I wanted to know if I really believed or if I only believed because of my parents.
Yeah.
And while I think that's a good thing because my parents always showed me a great example, and like kind of that's one of the things I talked about is like, if you want to raise children who aren't deconstructing, one of the things that's important is that we have to show them the whole picture of faith and not just, you know, like we go to church on Sundays, but then you're a terrible person Monday through Saturday. You're partying and, you're just not living Christ-like.
Yeah.
And so my parents weren't that. So I had a great example of, I knew it was real for my parents. And so that always was one of those things that kept bringing me back around. And even you and how I saw you handled the pornography thing, and that like you truly wanted to submit that to the Lord
Mm-hmm.
and that area of your life. And as we walked through that, you did that, like, because like I would say days like, I'm so angry with you today.
Yeah.
When I think about it, it makes me really mad. And you would just be like, I'm so sorry. And I just saw Jesus in you through that whole stuff that, just like you were always trying to just, make things right with me. And so that really is one of those things that brought me back around, is like I said, I saw Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
as cheesy as this is, with skin on.
Jesus
with skin on.
Hands and feet. Hands and feet.
So, I saw that in you and in my parents. And so when I was questioning, that was always in the back of my mind.
Thanks, babe.
Yeah. So,
Makes me feel good.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, so you made some great points about like, not just showing up on Sunday.
Yeah.
And it's like a lot of parents, we did youth for a while, kids, and this isn't any of you, so don't worry about it. But a lot of parents, they drop kids off at church and like fix them,
yeah.
right?
Right.
And I mean, we get an hour with them.
Yeah.
And more is caught than taught, so we could teach them. But it kind of reminded me of there's this guy, I cannot pronounce his last name, but his name's Cliff.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And he debates. He doesn't really, I don't feel like he's really like hostile debates.
No,
but
no,
he,
no. But
he
people
goes,
ask him questions.
Yeah, people ask him questions. He goes to universities and they have this open forum conversation. Yeah. And one of the things he says, that, he answers like, well, why do you believe in Jesus? And Cliff, he just says, it's faith, but it's based on evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, if we want our kids to believe, we've got to give them evidence. What evidence are you giving your kids? I mean, your parents gave you evidence, but it was still on you.
Yeah.
To take that evidence and decide to believe.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So like they're not believing for you. So as parents, we have to be really conscious
evidence,
of like what kind of evidence am I giving?
Mm-hmm.
I want them to know Jesus. What kind of evidence am I giving them?
What's the reason? Yeah.
Yeah.
And not that that's like the end all be all and the solution, but it's going to take away a huge portion of it,
Yeah.
Because
I'm not talking about like evidence, like here's all the transcripts of all the.
Yeah.
I'm talking about like.
You are the walking evidence.
Is this worth doing? Is this real? Where's the evidence that this is like Jesus is actually real?
Yeah.
Or is this something that we do because this is what our family does? We check the box off.
Yeah.
And that's
what Judas was doing.
About.
He was checking the box off.
Yeah.
He was all talk,
Yeah. He even did miracles. Think about that. Jesus, he was part of the disciples when Jesus sent them out to go and perform miracles and preach the gospel. He preached the gospel to people all around Judea. And yet, his heart was still far from the Lord.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It
scary.
just makes you think like, oh, Lord, I don't want to be like that.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to read this last verse and close if you don't have anything else. Because this kind of sums up everything that Lauren talks about grace and what grace is. And this is Romans 5, verse 6 through 8. When we were utterly helpless, Christ came at just the right time and died for us sinners. Now, most people would not be willing to die for an upright person. Someone might perhaps be willing to die for a person who is especially good. But God showed his great love for us by sending Christ to die for us while we were still sinners.
Yeah.
And since we've been made right in God's sight by the blood of Jesus, he will certainly save us from God's condemnation.
Yeah.
For since our friendship with God was restored by the death of his Son while we were still his enemies, we will certainly be saved through the life of Jesus, his Son.
Yeah.
So that's what Jesus did. While we were enemies, He paved the way for us to have life.
Yeah. Amen.
So, good job.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, those are my notes. You're approved.
Good.
You can speak again.
Oh, good.
No, I'm looking forward to the next time you preach. It's going to be great. It's going to be good.
I used all my thoughts on that one, so.
So, and then take a year
Yeah.
to get a new one.
Exactly.
Well, thank you guys for hanging out with us. And you can go, we're going to include the link to Lauren's sermon. And we encourage you to go back and listen to it. And have a blessed week. We'll see you Sunday.
See ya.